Um, how do I admit folks from the waiting room? Wait, are you guys in the waiting room? Can somebody come off? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought folks were in the waiting room. I was trying to get this figured out. My apologies. Octavia, you had a question before we get started? Octavia, you
Hi,
should be
yeah,
able to
I was just saying that
okay.
the chat, I couldn't type in the chat, and so I was just raising my hand to let you know that I was here and not in the waiting room.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right. All right, so welcome everyone. We are here with our final session with Mariah Barber, who facilitated our in-person storytelling portion of the workshop and our virtual storytelling workshop. So I am not going to reintroduce Mariah with her lovely bio. I'll let Mariah briefly introduce herself, um, and then we'll go ahead and get started. I will say I am going to enable the chat. However, I'm going to ask that if you have questions specifically about the presentation, to please put your questions in the Q&A. That way, if we run out of time, I can download those questions from the Q&A and get them sent over to Mariah for her to be able to respond to you. Also note about that, if you put a question anonymously in the Q&A, which certainly is your right, we will not be able to follow up with you if we run out of time and are unable to get to your question. So that said, I will say thank you for joining us and welcome back, Mariah.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, everybody. Good to be with you all again. I am going to go ahead and share my screen and get into the presentation. Super excited to be with everyone again. This will be a different style than we've gone through with our previous work together, and that I'm kind of going to be doing more case studies and just sharing examples. I do have some links to click out to videos and things like that. So I think we should be good to go with that, Nikki, but may end up needing some troubleshooting. But yeah, appreciate everybody being here. Feel free to share in the chat if you want to share where you're tuning in from. But super excited to combine the national fellows as well as the international fellows. So you guys had learned a little bit about me. I went a little too quick, but like as a reminder, I've worked in the global health space for over 13 years now. That's involved environmental justice as well. So I just pulled some experiences from my career that involved in storytelling, whether it was with policy work, working in international development with non-governmental organizations, and tried to pull from different cultural contexts too. You will receive this PowerPoint presentation at the end. So don't worry if while I'm going through stuff, you're like, wait, I want to remember that full story that Mariah was sharing. A lot of this is archived online. And so you'll be able to go in and dig a little bit deeper and look at the resources. Really passionate about environmental justice, of course, like all of you all. Put a heart up if you're feeling that, but I'm also very passionate about LGBTQ rights, Black liberation, disability rights, and just global health in general. So you'll see that come through with some of the examples I'm going to share today. So I always like to set the tone. So this is definitely just going to be an interactive session that will involve case studies and just talking about techniques we can use to uplift frontline voices. And really feel free, as Nikki said, to ask your questions in the chat throughout. There'll be some references to visual media, podcasting, and just other ways to involve storytelling in the work we're doing. So wanted to go ahead and start with talking about my own lived experience. I know from our first workshop, we've talked about the power of lived experiences of frontline communities and how we want to always center that in our storytelling. So I am the descendant of griots within my family. This is a picture of some of my family. We had a family reunion and we got to go to the African American Museum here in DC before it was being censored at all. And that person in the front is my grandfather. He's now 87 years old, and we were able to like look on the digital archives there, and he remembers a lot of stories of the family and names of the family. So we were able to look up back to the actual census where we were claimed as property, and then that next year's census where we were actually counted as folks in the United States. And so that was really amazing. And just looking at your own descendant stories and the role that griots of storytellings play in your family may be your entry point to a lot of this work. And we saw this before, but this is again another picture within the African American Museum, and it's when a griot dies, a library burns, and it's an African proverb. And I think that it's really powerful to think about how we archive or save griot stories or how we push that storytelling forward. And I hope that's a trend with some of the case study examples I share. It's so powerful that our elders hold so much of the knowledge of our ancestors and have done so much of that forefront work on the ground, but we never want to have when an elder passes away, us, losing that knowledge. And that's why it's important to pass it down to the next generation, to have initiatives that help to save all of this amazing information and historic knowledge. So really got into griot work myself, and blending my artistry with storytelling through local organizing. I started a lot with HIV treatment access in North Carolina, and also had the opportunity to get to work in Baltimore on trying to take lead exposure out of older buildings in Baltimore. It was present a lot within the paint. And often we would see like it can be like having a sweet taste. So sometimes children will be eating some of those paint chips, and just kind of got involved into more environmental work through that avenue of public health. Also worked within Costa Rica, looking into turtle habitats and food access work there. And that kind of showed me how there's through lines and all of our stories are connected, regardless of these borders that are drawn all around the world. So really realized that a lot more of community accessibility could be started up through having just conversations and telling stories. So this is just some of the photos from that. I want to ground us in just understanding the difference between equality and equity when it comes to environmental justice storytelling. So if we see the top box that we're looking at, where it shows equality, where everyone's being given the exact same bike. In this bike, in a sense, is a metaphor for the exact same resources, the exact same land, maybe it's water, maybe it's education. But then when we see the bottom box here, we know we're moving towards systems of more equity centered. So if you look at the equity centered system, you may be able to share in the chat if you've seen a visual like this before, what's coming up for you. Would love to hear from folks, but I'll just describe it briefly. So with the first person, we can see that they had a mobility centered disability, so they predominantly use a wheelchair, and so they needed to have an accessible bike. So their bike was going to look different than other folks' bikes. Maybe there's a different cost, maybe there's a different process to get in, but that's what equity looks like for them to be able to take advantage of riding a bike. For the next person, we see that they were a very tall person. Maybe we have a lot of tall folks on the call. I'm jealous. I'm a shorter person, but with the tall folks, they did need to have like a bike that fit their body type, that made sense, and that was more centering equity. If you see the top photo, the bike that they received, though it was uniform for everyone, it wasn't adaptable to their body either. We see the third image. This person has longer hair, and I think this we could maybe assume that this is a woman riding this bike. We see that her bike is the same, that uniform bike or the uniform resources that did work for her. So she didn't need anything adapted for her scenario when we came to looking at equity for her. And then we look at a little kid, and look at that little kid on the top photo trying to be on this adult bike. At the bottom, we see equity where it's tailored towards their size. So this is just more about when it comes to making sure that we have like needs assessments in our community, that we're tailoring our stories, we're tailoring whatever the solutions are to meet community where they are and to meet whatever direct needs that they have. This is another image of the reality right now, all the way down to I love liberation. So with the reality right now, we can see that barrier to the physical beach as all of the barriers, whether it's the oil industry, whether it's exorbitant prices with electricity, whether we're thinking about just barriers to policy we want to implement in the environmental justice space or initiatives, there's blockers in the way. And again, equality is where everyone has the same. Equity is where we tailor things to what folks need. And liberation, I love showing this image because it means that nothing is in our way. Everyone has access to a healthy environment, to the resources that they need, and that's what we're moving towards. This is a pyramid that kind of breaks down some of white supremacy. I just wanted to give this baseline before I get into my direct examples I've worked with. At the top, you can see genocide, which unfortunately a lot of us have seen and been experiencing when we see what's happening in Palestine right now. Maybe you can think of other genocides that you've experienced or that your people or even that you've read about, going down all the way to indifference. So there's different levels of harm that can be inflicted on folks, but we always have to be knowledgeable about our power and privilege and what messages we're spreading, especially when it comes to our storytelling. So when you can see down at the indifference at the bottom of this pyramid, maybe folks are just avoiding confrontation or avoiding conversations. Maybe they're not challenging a racist or an offensive joke, or remaining apolitical. We know that that's still not pushing us forward to liberation. And genocide at the top is obviously the most aggressive and most a way that we've seen like this pyramid of white supremacy taking place in the modern day, unfortunately. Definitely share in the chat if you've seen anything around this or maybe how it fits into your cultural context, because we know that anti-Blackness and this colonialization is global. And it does take different forms just depending on what the demographic groups look like in your nation and your community and your areas that you're working on. So just want to show an example of implicit bias in media. So this is actually taken from articles that were written around Hurricane Katrina. Again, we're coming up on Hurricane Katrina 2020. This was a hurricane that completely devastated New Orleans and a large part of Louisiana and the Gulf at large. And we can see at the top, there is an article stating a young man walks through chest deep floodwater after looting. This is like a negative term in the US that is associated with stealing from a store, looting from a grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday, August 30th, 2005. Floodwaters continue to rise in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina did extreme damage. Now we see this bottom photo. And again, we can see that this is a darker skinned Black person that is depicted here who's just trying to survive a natural disaster. Down at the bottom, we see that folks are lighter and we're looking probably Caucasian folks, probably white folks. And we see the description here is two residents wade through chest deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store after Hurricane Katrina came through the area in New Orleans, Louisiana. So just taking a moment, I saw Nikki came back off camera, but if folks can relate to this implicit bias or have seen things like this in the media, you can put a thumbs up, you can put a few maybe comments that you have in the chat. Definitely want to keep everybody a part of this conversation, but this is why it's so important and why we went through the basics and the fundamentals, because understanding how we're crafting the media, who gets to center their story and their voice, because both pictures are folks just trying to survive in a natural disaster, but the perception and the story behind both are quite different. So intersectionality comes up a lot in storytelling. This is just what I like to call being a Venn diagram, baby, or at the middle of a lot of different identities. So we can see like ability, race, sexual orientation, age, gender identity, class. All of these things may come into play when we're telling stories, and who is telling these stories, who is uplifted in the media, or just in other spaces. And we can even think about that in our own workplaces and our own places where our stories are being pushed forward. Is everyone represented? Do the stories differ depending on what groups they may be a part of? How can we diversify those voices in those spaces? And we're always wanting to uplift unheard voices and pass the microphone. Those of us who have lived experiences are experts, just like those of us who have gone to school. And who's better to share than the ones that are on the front line? So, griot, lore, stories, and narrative change. So lore, I think some of us got to go through it during the first workshop I gave, but just want to make sure everyone has an understanding. It's a collective knowledge of traditions and beliefs from a group of people. It's often passed down through generations by word of mouth, and it can involve myth, legends, customs, proverbs, songs, or even rituals. An example of lore is herbal lore, and that can refer to like herbalists, or there may be other herbalists in the chat. Put a heart. I'm also an herbalist myself. Plant-based healing. So maybe you know about yarrow or tulsi or other different herbs that have been passed down to do certain remedies in your family. So I did want to give an example here. Wanted to make sure, can you give me a thumbs up, Nikki, because I can see you if you can see my screen?
Got it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is an example actually that I was able to work with a group in DC. This is actually the MHHJ or the Medical Humanities and Health Justice Initiative, and it's a collaboration between Georgetown University and Howard University, which is a historically Black college and university here in DC. They focus on being able to basically fill the gaps between what's happening in healthcare systems, pharmaceutical systems, and meet people where they are, uplift their stories. So we did an initiative called an event called Poetic Justice, where we focus on cancer lore. So definitely have this link here. So I want you guys to be able to check it out deeper. But basically, we brought community leaders from folks who were cancer doctors, people in the community who had a history of cancer in their family, or maybe dealt with cancer themselves. And we held different poetry workshops leading up to the event where folks who were actually patients or caregivers could craft their own stories. They held a forum about different things that they wanted to see changing within systems. We also had visual artists that had created some visual representations of what it was like to be dealing with cancer. We had some panel discussions from activists and folks in the environmental space talking about some of the causes of cancer. And then we also had people from like the pharmaceutical industry talking about some of the gaps there. And yeah, it was really a wonderful event. But we also continued to engage with folks and kind of created a community of interconnectedness and a network of folks who could just talk about some of the cancer lore or stories that they have heard in the community, some things they want to change about that, and how we could be a part of that. So that was just one example that I wanted to share with everyone in the lore category. And now I want to just go over griot again, and just will see a thumbs up from Nikki again. I got you on my screen, Nikki, for something. Okay, cool. I see you shaking your head. So with griot, it's a West African oral historian, poet, musician, and story keeper. So griots, a lot of times, it was a very honorable title to have because they're going to be recounting the history of their people and using different methods to do that. And this could be praise songs, they could be social commentators. Sometimes they could have plays, just different ways to make sure that ancestral knowledge goes to each generation. And so one example that I want to share of griots This was actually from 2014 in January. I had the opportunity to be able to go to a summit that was focused on environmental justice and women leaders in that space, and that was held within Jamaica. And one thing that we were able to do was do a cultural exchange with the Maroon people. So the Maroon people actually were in St. Anne's area of Jamaica, and they actually liberated themselves from colonization when folks tried to colonize Jamaica. They ran into the area that they still occupy and have basically a sovereign government, a sovereign nation where they grow their own crops. They have their own education system and leadership system. And so we were able to go to the cultural center there, and actually the brother you see here, his name is Kojo, and he was actually the next generation of griots for that community, and took us around the community, showed us some of the cultural artifacts, some of the historic grounds, the traditions, introduced us to some of the community, showed us the crops and just like how they've remained sovereign, some of their direct history from them fighting back from colonization to now. And yeah, we were able to see some of the artists, talk to some of the elder griots as well, and just wanted to show a bit of the story and just a modern example. Definitely share in the chat if you're familiar with griots or you've been able to do work with griots and some of your EJ work. Maybe even if you haven't, some things you're thinking about. Um, and now we'll move on to storytelling. So storytelling, I know that was the focus of our workshop and our time together that we had in the past. And it really can be spoken, written, sung, dance. There's no limits to how a story can be told. And it's basically shapes how people understand themselves and the world. And it's used for teaching, healing, entertaining, and resisting oppression. And I think some of us were able to check out the story specifically from the international fellows group, but I'll go over this briefly. So this is actually a book called Come Together, and it's an Australian children's book that shows the history of Aboriginal folks in the country. The illustrator, Jalen, is actually a friend and also someone very involved in the EJ movement and Aboriginal herself. And they basically wanted to make sure that they had a story for them and by them that is actually sold at the Jellicoe Cultural Center on the Gold Coast of Australia, but also you definitely can order on Amazon to make sure you can check it out wherever you are located right now in the world. And I wanted to show this brief video as well, just kind of to show us the power of storytelling. Could you hear so far, Nikki, that?
No, I don't hear anything.
Okay.
Just remember when you share screen, you have to click that little button on the right that says you'll be sharing sound.
Gotcha. Okay, let me stop sharing and reshare then. Okay.
While Mariah is resharing her screen, I see some going ons in the chat here. Please feel free to share any additional resources that you all may have, or Stephanie C, I see that you put something about Senegal in the chat. I don't know if it says yes, meet on in Senegal. I think it may be a typo. So if you could provide a little clarification on that. Miriam, I see that you're very active in the chat, but you need to select everyone when you put chat so that people can see it. Right now you're only chatting with myself and Mariah.
Okay, let me try again. Are you hearing it now?
The story of our communities, people, and nation starts a long, long time ago. More than 60,000 years, in fact. This was when our culture and our law first started to thrive. We knew who we were and where we belonged. We took care of each other, our land, and our waters. We ate food that made us healthy, lived on country, and abided by our laws and song lines. Our families, our children were happy, with strong minds and hearts, because they were where they belonged. Then everything changed.
Colonization came, bringing wars, disease, famine, violence, and the destruction and violation of our cultural laws, sacred sites, families, and communities.
We were denied our knowledge, language, ceremonies, and identity, the very things that tell us who we are and where we belong. And our connections with each other and the land grew weak.
And then our children were taken from us. They had their names changed and their identities stripped away. They were told that Aboriginal people were bad. Worse still, they were told that their parents and grandparents did not want them.
For years this happened, and those children became known as the stolen generations.
Our children were denied love and experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. This left very deep, very complex, and very real wounds, leaving scars that are still being felt personally, socially, spiritually, and collectively.
In the time when our story started, we were able to parent in the cultural way that has seen our families survive and thrive for generations. Our people were strong, and our culture flowed and healed us in times of hurt.
But since the trauma of colonization and the stolen generations, we have not been able to heal in the same way. And we have unknowingly passed this trauma on to our children through sharing our sad stories and having them witness and experience our pain. This is known as intergenerational trauma, and we see symptoms today in broken relationships, disconnected families, violence, suicide, and drug and alcohol abuse.
But this is not where our story ends. We still have strong minds and hearts, and we still know who we were and where we belong. By creating safe and strong communities together, supporting our families to be free from pain, returning to our culture and building a strength of identity, we can stop the cycle of trauma and bring about positive intergenerational change so that we can continue to thrive for the next 60,000 years. There are simple things that we can all do to help heal our trauma.
Visit healingfoundation.org.au to find out more.
Thank you guys for listening to that video. I really love that they also incorporated the visual storytelling. And I think a lot of our cultures can relate to what they're speaking to. So as an overview, a griot is not just a performer, but they're a living archive. At the core, storytelling is a tool for connection and transformation, and lore can be a cultural memory bank. And then with truth, racial healing, and transformation, that is a framework that is sometimes used when it comes to healing communities and bringing back the power of telling our own narratives. And narrative change can also be known as truth telling. Racial healing is really built on those trust and relationship building. And this is a visual I had from another example of working with the American Public Health Association, with trying to do a lot of listening sessions with different marginalized communities to kind of hear how separation, how law, how the economy, how local coalitions and narrative change and racial healing can be more embedded into policies that we have in the US. And through those listening sessions, we came up with some ideas for policy papers. And it was a facilitated conversation where we brought in local leaders, citizens, just different folks across different groups to be able to talk and tell their stories about how different areas of life were impacting them and what they would like to see in future policies. This is also another example I wanted to share. This is way back in 2012 with NAACP. They had an environmental justice summit where they had a lot of frontline communities, like those from Cancer Alley, which is a area within the Gulf of Louisiana that is afflicted with a lot of cancer because of the fact that many industry has set up their headquarters and have a lot of factories polluting the air, water, and land there. And really, it was so compelling because folks were able to tell how these polluters and how these exposures in the environment have impacted their families through generations. And it activated a lot of folks to want to take a part in some direct actions and also just be a part of coalitions and initiatives to stop these polluters and these big companies. So other ways that stories can be taken off the page or kind of put beyond policy and create narrative change. This was another just logo from a podcast where we really were exploring more questions of environmental justice, of health equity, and being able to again interview people, uplift their stories of how they've been supporting change in their community or some disparities or unfortunate events that they've been going through and things that they're calling out for assistance with. And that was more focused on like radio and podcasting. This was another example I wanted to show of where we really talked about how storytelling can support patient narratives and help us to be better providers and just have better healthcare systems. This again example was more focused within the United States. However, we did have some folks from the international space that research how storytelling does impact supporting a better caretaking or care continuum in the healthcare space. This was one other example that I wanted to share. I have a few case studies on here, and I'm happy to answer questions later, like Nikki said as well. But this one actually takes place in Peru. I know I got to speak a little bit about it to some of the groups, but this was, I was trained as a cultural anthropologist. And this was my capstone in cultural anthropology, was really focusing with women in Huaraz or in the Peruvian highlands that are subsistence farmers and really just talking with them about what are some of the unintentional impacts from climate change that have been affecting them. But of course, I didn't come in with that type of research question. I came in just with asking them if I could help them with harvesting because it was heavy on potato season at that time. Got very strong those summers. But essentially, just talking to them about like what is life like? What changes have they seen, or like how long has there been their family been indigenous to the lands? What did they notice around the Andes mountain range where they live? Just talking to them about also their roles as women. What are specific issues that they deal with as being women? And this was a little bit more about the research analysis, but basically there were a lot of common things that folks started to say, and we ended up going with these top 13 things that people said. A lot of times they spoke about having just less rainfall and just less access to water because of that. There was also mentioning of mines being built and that also kind of affecting the soil. Mines being built by the government and in some cases illegally, difficulties with working the farm, caring for the children, and like also managing, having less harvest and more like crop illness. Just not having many opportunities for women in general, not having educational opportunities because a lot of times they were in more of a isolated area and it would be about 2 hours to go to school and also an additional cost to do that. And so with there being less rain and less crop yield, there was less money for education, and just sometimes feeling unsafe, feeling like there was agitation in the community from some of the issues they were facing, and just having illness as well, and just problems with their partners. And some of the results from that project was just understanding that there were different main three categories that women mentioned from indigenous folks in Wadas. And women would talk about things related to their gender role. being heavy as a stressor, things related to the household, and then things related to like subsistence farming and how those things were also interconnected and relating and playing on each other. So when there were issues with subsistence farming, it was also affecting folks that were identified as women in the community because there was less safety. There was less money to send for school and other opportunities and for healthcare. When it came to domestic issues as well, just talking about how when there was less crop yield, sometimes there was less to be able to feed animals that they were also taking care of, and less to go around when it came to cooking and having excess to be able to sell at markets. Another example of storytelling that I wanted to share was I had the opportunity to get to work with freedmen settlements in the Midwest part of the United States. And freedmen settlements were settlements that came up out of slavery. A lot of times, the land that were given to newly freed Black folks may have been floodplains, may have been just land that was not suitable or was not desirable by other folks in power. And they were not always able to grow things, or sometimes, even if it was great land, eventually they would allow for factories and even coal mining and different things to take place on the land. So a big part of that work was actually talking with griots, um, going to visit places like the cemetery, the library, where there were a lot of archives of the community, and also just speaking with them about how things have changed through time. Unfortunately, many of the communities folks have left, and they're not as populous or as vibrant as they were 20 years ago because coal mines have closed, or land lost has occurred, land being stolen has occurred. And so many people have migrated to different places, but there's still a lot of archival and history and initiatives trying to take place in these areas. So we also would hold like community visioning sessions where communities could talk about what their vision was for the future. Griots or elders in the communities that may have been in their 80s or 70s could talk about the history of what they've seen, share some archives that maybe they had in their home, or some just point out to newspapers to great floods and different experiences that had happened throughout the community. Another example wanted to share is, if you guys remember the video I showed you, I've actually worked with youth where they're understanding climate change and colonization, and we've showed them that video and they've been able to write their own poetry, and we actually were able to turn it into a musical that was called Dreaming Forward. That was about like with a high school here in DC. And it was about like what happens now that we're dealing with the president we are now, and like how do we remember the ways that our ancestors communicated with the land, even though we're in a really urban city. So that's another way where storytelling can be brought into new mediums of art. You can have it take on a new life of its own, and we have the youth co-write a lot of their own poetry into the play and perform it themselves for their school, and really just learn a lot about colonization, about where all of their different families are from, and how to kind of move forward and empower themselves. This is a case study out of South Africa that I wanted to share, and we've got two left, including this one. So this actually was my work with Global Health Advocacy Incubator. So I just want to go to this link, and I definitely suggest that a lot of folks check this out later. They have tons of case studies on their websites, and what they do is, I was a project officer with them, but basically we funded different NGOs within different countries across the world, and we help them to promote media campaigns around whatever health issue or environmental issue they were focused on supporting within their community. So in this case, this was actually a sugary drink campaign in South Africa. Sometimes the industry is a coal company or an energy plant, but sometimes it also can be Coca-Cola. And so that was interesting to see as well. And so Coke has a lot of just campaigns where they're pushing folks drinking sodas and kind of unhealthy foods, growing a lot of corn for corn syrup focused products. And so, yeah, we wanted to really help to change that policy, but doing it through having a lot of media campaigns. And so, I won't go into all of this, but we did a lot of grassroots campaigns and commercials and media to help kind of see how people felt around Coke being such a big presence in the community and how they maybe saw it impacting people's health, what things they wanted to see moving forward, and for the price to be brought down for water or even for it to be free, like it had been historically when there were safe wells and places to drink and access that. There was also a lot of engagement with social media and influencers, which I see being something that we're going to continue to see in this digital age. So that was also very interesting, and definitely check out their website for more of that. And then also just wanted to briefly show this is still from the same organization. We were able to fund a different type of initiative, still focusing on water access and limiting sugary drinks in St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. And they were actually able to create a soca song to get folks involved and kind of share the story and the messaging that they were trying to. So I'll play a little bit of this. Maybe
Hold on, stop. Think about the drink before you take a drop. Read up on the label on the back. They say science sugar low in fat. But don't be fooled by that. Drink some water, share some love. Then your body is sweet enough. Drink some water, share some love. Then somebody is sweet enough. Drink some water, share some love. Then your body is sweet enough. Drink some water, share some love. Then somebody.
And if you can't tell, I'm a big Soca fan. I was over here like dancing a little bit. I saw Nikki smiling. But just another way for us to get out the messaging, and again, just allow the community to center whatever is most prominent in their culture. And so they actually had like folks doing a viral dance to the song, and just another way to push forward initiatives and the work that we're trying to do through story, through song, through media. And so when we continue this work, there are different ways to engage. Some other ways are like archival training, empowering our youth voice, and also making sure it's intergenerational. So we're like making sure that the youth are talking to elder griots so they can make sure that they understand the stories and can make sure they're still making sure the stories continue on. And there's also a lot of environmental justice griot fellowships. Um, there's expanding interdisciplinary collaborations with different institutions. I know I shared some examples from my work. Sometimes it's working with universities, sometimes it could be NGOs, or even like local artists, local schools. So, really, at all levels. And now I just wanted to stop and check out some of the questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen too so that everyone can see me and Nikki. I want to go to the chat. Yes. And I'm just reading here on the chat, catching up with you guys. Thank you for staying with me. Oh, amazing. Stephanie's staring about a griot that they met in Senegal, speaking about slave trade and the door of no return. Oh, I see that some people weren't able to see the video or hear it. So I'm going to definitely make sure the presentation is shared out so that you can make sure you were able to check that out.
Yeah, and also, do you mind sharing the link to those videos in the chat,
Yeah,
Mariah?
sure,
But we
sure.
do
I'm
have
happy.
one question in the Q&A from Stephanie Yarborough. How can she learn more about EJ Griot fellowships?
So one in particular that I participated in, um, this one is in the US, but it's by Young, Gifted, and Green. Um, I'll put it in the chat if that's helpful. just to
Yeah, and Young, Gifted, and Green, their their Griot Fellowship application recently closed, actually. So I know for that organization, at least, you have to wait until next year. And from what I remember reading, there was an age limit. I think the cutoff was it 35, Mariah?
I think it might be 35. I think you might be
Okay.
and I also know about another organization. It's sponsored by, if I'm not mistaken, US Can or Climate Action Network, but it's a climate reparations.
Oh,
Um,
see, can.
yes, yes. And Action Aid, and it's focused on like climate reparations, but storytelling specifically around that. I know that I just participated in that initiative earlier this month. But I do think that they're going to make it an annual thing. So I will share it in the chat as well. And I think you asked me to share just the videos that
Yeah.
I shared do this so
While
that people
Mariah's sharing the video, I want to put up a quick poll for everybody to respond about her presentation. So I want you to think about in your own work, what is the biggest challenge you face in centering frontline community stories? So we have access, gaining trust and access to community members, knowing how to effectively amplify stories. That means choosing the right medium and audience, concern about tokenism, extraction, or re traumatization, and then finally connecting storytelling to tangible action or policy change. So let's take about another 30 seconds and respond to that.
And while you're also responding to that, I also did think of one more environmental justice griot resource. I have worked with Chisholm Legacy Project, and I know they have like a lot of resources within their like toolkit for free trainings, but some of them focus on like storytelling and helping to center the stories of frontline communities. And I know they're trying to work on a larger initiative to support like griot work. Um, but that would be something more to stay tuned for and seeing what they already have in their EJ training like archive. But
Yeah.
thank you
Yeah.
for that question. This is a
Welcome. We
good
have two more people who haven't responded to the poll. Um, so leave it open 10, 9,
the
8,
countdown.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Then I'll share those results with everybody. Wow. So those of us that responded uh, said that impact, connecting storytelling to tangible action or policy is your biggest challenge. So having seen that, Mariah, could you talk a little bit about that and maybe what people can do to sort of remedy that?
Sure. Can you repeat the question just once more?
Absolutely. So in your own work, what is the biggest challenge you face in centering frontline community stories? And majority of the folks selected connecting storytelling to tangible action or policy change.
Yes, I definitely can speak to that. I know I'll just give two examples. One was on my national scale, and then one was global. So with the national scale, of like being able connecting storytelling to the climate change work or to the policy change work. Um, I would say that when it came to working with frontline freedmen settlements, with specifically one settlement that we had worked with in Sand Branch, Texas, they were concerned, as you spoke about it being extractive. Of course, it takes time when building an organizing relationship, when showing up in a community, when they don't know you, and feeling like they trust you to tell their stories. So it really took like over a year for them to really feel confident to even want to um, tell their stories to outsiders outside of the direct organizers that they had worked with and they were familiar with at their own, individual council meetings. And we just started small. And from there, eventually they were comfortable talking about how folks had been on bottled water for over 10 years because of pollution within the community of water supply. And so there was a desire to, through the visioning sessions of like talking about like what would they like to see for the future of the community, wanting to get more wells dug in the community. So we came up with an action plan of like how to center the stories by bringing in some media, even developing like a kind of like short video, and starting to do like some fundraising around getting the money to be able to dig these new wells, and also just raising awareness that this injustice was occurring. And so it did take time, but I think about like 3 years total, they were able to get the money to get the new wells dug, and also just made sure in every touch and turn, you're like making sure that the community feels comfortable, that it doesn't feel extractive, that they still feel in control of their story and what's happening with the community. So I hope that was helpful. And then the second example I was thinking about was some of the work with within like global health advocacy incubator. A big thing we would always want to do is like make sure that people felt comfortable with what was happening with their story once it left them. Always making sure like you're re-engaging with the community again and again and updating them on what's happening. So it's not like it's a one-time event of you hearing the story or you doing this needs assessment and then you show up at the end of the project letting them know what you created. Making sure that hand in hand you're developing things if things don't feel authentic, or they're like, no, this song doesn't feel right, or we don't really feel comfortable speaking at this particular rally, or policy event, or this particular like, forum thing. You're just always centering what the desires are of the community and of the storytellers, and getting their feedback throughout. And so in the end, it took time, of course, to go from uplifting that story to changing policy around healthy foods. But overall, we did start to see some shifts happening, and just coalition building, and really always wanted to like even celebrate the small incremental things before those large policy changes around like how the label on the drinks and food had to be displayed changed. So I hope that that was helpful for folks. And it can be very small too. It doesn't have to be a huge policy win, but sometimes I've even seen where at direct actions, or rallies, they have maybe a poet open up the space with a poem, or a community member, get folks excited by sharing about what it's been like living in this community, what it used to be like before industry was there, before the extractive thing occurred, and what they want the future to look like. And it can be just speaking for a minute time, and just get people really excited going into the session you're about to have, or the town hall, whatever it looks like for you.
Thanks so much, Mariah. I see a question from Evelyn. She says she really liked the musical put together by the youth. How did you go about creating that and how long did it take?
Yeah, so that one I was super excited to participate in. I work with the city of DC, and they'll pair me as a poet for certain initiatives with the school system. And I just happened to be doing that work and talking to a friend about it who is a high school theater teacher. And she's also just an advocate. She's from Brazil, and loves just the environmental justice work as well. And she had talked about how she kind of had a draft of this musical that she was thinking about wanting to do with her students. And I already was able to be paid through the city and come into different schools. So I asked her if she wanted to incorporate some poetry, and talk about some environmental justice lessons and things within the school year. And we both agreed and just were able to work together. It was pretty much a full school year of us, kind of just first showing things like the videos, talking about what environmental justice even means. Also just talking about like just little questions and breaking it down to their understanding level. So we show pictures of like a city, where there's like skyscrapers and stuff. And then we'd show pictures of like a area where people were doing farming and they're like in full harvest season, and we'd be like, which environment seems like it's richer to you and why? And of course, a lot of them being from the urban area, we're talking about, oh, like the city, they've got more going on. But then we would be like, well, this is a lot of wealth too, with them having their own land, they have their own food, their own water, and they don't have to like pay for those things at a store. And so just getting their minds thinking about that, and then figuring out what students wanted to be a part of the dance side of things, which ones wanted to be a part of the helping to write out some parts of the script, helping to cast and like practice and do all of those things. So it was pretty much just like a semester within the school year. And I was able to partner, like I said, with a high school theater teacher at Coolidge High School, specifically in DC. But sometimes you can work with maybe a script that's already written a bit, or something smaller that would be like a shorter term thing if that's what you're looking to do. I also have worked with some youth initiatives where it was just over the summer. And we just had, different writing prompts and things, and we were putting together a book together. And some elements of the book would talk about some of the EJ work that we wanted to see happen in their community. But yeah,
Thank you,
I hope
Mariah.
that answered that question.
We do have another question. And while we're talking about youth, so you talked about what you did to like engage youth, obviously in schools, you were working in school. So what are some suggestions to bring young people into the griot space to
Mhm.
begin to tell the story of the EJ movement? And let's add to that and say that's not necessarily related to school or like a school project. Like what would you suggest?
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, I definitely know outside of school project, ways in which I've been able to engage is sometimes partnering with like libraries, for example, and just having like a free activity for them to do over the summer. And the activity is something fun where it's like they're going to come up with their own rap, or act like they're hosting a podcast show, something that brings in new media and excites them. But then, like, the topic area that I'll focus on is like something around the environment, and just kind of building in, sneaking in that political education about stuff through like also providing just activities for youth. Sometimes it's been with museums or libraries. Another way is just I have had just offerings of community sessions, like of writing haikus, similar to what we did with like just a local coffee shop, and just talking to parents about, hey, would this be something that your youth might be interested in engaging, meeting them where they are and making it something that can be really fun. Sometimes instead of maybe calling it griot right away, excuse me, talking to them about like what music they like, what are their favorite artists, or what are their favorite shows on Netflix or whatever streaming platform they're using, and then think about like what the script was trying to tell you, or like telling them about artivism, and like if they were to create their own script or they were to create their own song, or what have you, like what would they want to say? And again, doing some education around like some environmental stuff. I've had some times where we just did like a nature walk, like a walk around our neighborhood, hearing what sounds we notice, seeing what we notice on the ground, whether it's trash, leaves. We're hearing, ambulances go by, or we're hearing the wind go by, and then breaking that down and like tying it into, okay, this is what we're going to write about or what we're going to talk about today. Because they're always looking for something really fun to do. And also their parents are too. So yeah, those are ways I've engaged outside of the school setting, just local places that youth are hanging out, whether it's something organized or something more laid back and just a casual conversation. But a lot of them are really into some form of media, the arts. So even done some work where we like had a canvas and we took some of the things we found outside and decorated a canvas with it, and then wrote our haiku on the canvas. Just different ways to engage them and make it fun, but also learn, and get them excited about maybe wanting to be a storyteller. And there are a lot of youth that love poetry or love being able to keep on that tradition of like telling stories. And so giving them a place to do that or an outlet is really important. But yeah, I hope that helps. Sometimes nonprofits may also be willing to sponsor and host like free events for youth. That's been another avenue for me. Sometimes they'll just have like a free music or arts festival or something going on and being able to build something in there. Yeah,
Thank
those
you so much for that, Mariah. So we have about 7 minutes left. What I want to do is take a small deviation and just remind the folks that are left. We have two great pre-symposium sessions coming up next week. I'll be sure to send that information out to the fellows. Please be sure to register. For those, if you want to participate, I would love for you to join the one on Friday because I'm presenting that one. So hope you can join us for that. So now that we've gotten those reminders out of the way, oh, I apologize. There is one more reminder. If you have not chosen your final assignment, please make sure you have uh, clicked on the link in the emails that you were sent to add your name to the list to tell us what your final assignment is. Um, and if you have not registered for symposium, whether it's virtual or in person, please make sure you do that by the end of the day. Those of you that are joining in person, please make sure you have filled out the volunteer form. Now, that is the final reminder, but I do want to give us the opportunity to interact with Mariah, actually. So Mariah talked to us about a lot of different things, and one of the things that stuck out to me was, she talked about lore as being sort of that cultural memory bank. So I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to share with Mariah since, she shared that quote from her great grandmother. Um, what is one piece of lore, a family story, a community tradition, or a proverb or something else that has shaped your understanding of either justice, um, community, or what's that, Mariah?
oh I
Justice,
know.
sorry, justice, community, or the environment. So we have 5 minutes left. You could feel free to raise your hand. You can come off of mute and share with us if you'd like.
Just wanted to share the link from the video just in case folks wanted to check it out. Sorry it was so long.
Okay. So no one in the chat. So I'll start actually. So it's more of a like I think it's a common saying, but my grandmother used to tell uh my friends and I, especially the young ladies, um, don't take any wooden nickels from anybody. And if you know the history of wooden nickels, it basically relates to, BS, stand firm. I see somebody put something in the chat here. Yeah, so like stand firm. Um, don't accept the non-truths, basically. Um, so what are some of the things that you all have culturally? If you want to talk, you actually have to raise your hand because we're in a webinar. So I have to give you permission to speak. Uh, Miriam, would you have anything to add? I saw that you were very active in the chat. So let me take you off of mute. Uh, you can go ahead and unmute yourself now.
Yeah, hello, good morning. I come originally from Lebanon, and in Lebanon we have stories, even in the weddings, a short story will be told as a kind of advice to to those who are marrying, and poetry and reading poetry. The same, we have proverbs that encourage the people to have, a kind of resilience together and not to accept what colonizers bring. So our famous plant is wheat. So we tell you better eat the ugly wheat from your land rather than bring wheat, the quality wheat from outside. Yeah.
Thank you for
I
sharing.
shared two notes, but unluckily it was not for addressed to everyone. I didn't pay attention to that, and I wanted to copy paste, but I couldn't. So we have storytellers, mainly in the coffee shops. Those who which are public coffee shops, cultural ones. Okay, and the storyteller would tell a story from a book or from history. And then if there is advice regarding environment, he will mention it in front of all who are attending.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Miriam.
Thank you.
So we have exactly 1 minute left, and what I want to do is a rapid fire question to give Mariah uh, the final word, and to bring everything together for us. So, Mariah, you talked about how your work spans multiple areas like HIV advocacy, disability rights, LGBTQ rights, environmental justice. So, what can you tell folks quickly about how do you practically apply an intersectional lens to specific environmental justice campaigns to ensure no one's voice is left behind?
Mm. I feel like a lot of our work, especially if it's across equity lines, it can be like transferable. So one thing that I said it in the presentation, but passing the microphone. So always thinking about like the giving and taking space. So for example, with the HIV policy space, I was heavily involved with groups that would be like the voices of people living with HIV. So again, it's not like people creating these policies, but we're not actually centering the community who's dealing with this health issue at all times. And so really always making sure there's a place to bring in people with lived experience. And I feel like I transfer that to the EJ space too. Like it's not just people who maybe have their degree in environmental justice, which is amazing, but people who like have been at the front lines of natural disasters or have dealt with dealing with cancer in their family because of polluters. People who are at the front lines and dealing with environmental justice should always be also working at different levels within organizations and having a voice that's not just performative and telling their story, but actually involved in the development of the policy. So I like to think about that, even if it's housing justice or LGBTQ policy or justice, making sure people are at the table and hold power, not just there to for show, but that have lived that experience too. And there often are people who have lived that experience and have the degrees, which is amazing. But we have to really honor that lived experience. And so sometimes I haven't been directly in that group myself. And so always thinking about, okay, how can I bring people in or how can I voice that this is missing from what we're doing right now? And we need to take a step back and like make sure that they're involved from the beginning all the way to the end, and have really a big position of power in this work too.
Thank you so very much, Mariah. And I think that is a great place for us to end. Um, as usual, this session will be posted on the Fellows YouTube channel. So I'll be sure you guys be sure to check the link there. I'm going to post it under the Friday webinar sessions. You will also get the link to today's slides. Well, actually, you already have today's slides because it was in the previous slide deck that we sent from July, but I'll be sure to refresh that and make sure you have it. And on that note, I'm going to say if you have any questions for Mariah, feel free to um, email us or email her. I think, Mariah, did you put your contact information in the chat? Or is it's on your slides, right?
I can add it right here in the chat for everybody.
Okay, great. Absolutely. The nothing about us without us mindset. Yeah, and if we keep that in mind, we can look at lots of different social media campaigns or ads that are popularized by mainstream media as it relates to retail. We can always look at something and think, oh my goodness, like Jamal the intern was not in that room.
Exactly. And like always thinking about how to involve people at every level, like whether it's your board down to the intern, making sure they're representative of like the people you're serving or the work that you're doing. I
Yes.
think that is something people were focused on, but we can't forget. We can't forget.
Yep. All right. And with that, I'm going to say thank you, everyone, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank everybody for being so engaged and hope everybody has a beautiful rest of the day or evening, depending what time it is where you're at.